Hi, welcome to the Film Swap Podcast. I'm Nick Bull with Angelica Thornton. Hey, Angelica.
Hey, Nick, how are you doing?
I'm good. I made the mistake of doing physical labor before this, so I'm sweaty and weird, but that's pretty much par for the course.
I'm ready to go. I've never done this before.
You've never had a podcast before?
I've never had a podcast, and you've had multiple.
Well, but see, that
Right?
doesn't say like good things about me. I no longer have multiple. I just, podcasts are hard though, because, you start them and then people get busy and they drop out. And if you're not making money off of it, it's got to be a labor of love or something.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you want to be prepared. It kind of took us a while to get this one going, but I'm excited for this.
Yeah, it should be fun. And so well, the idea of this show is simply I've seen a lot of movies, you've seen a lot of movies, but we haven't all seen the same movies. And we find ourselves talking about what we're watching right now. And so it's like, why not just record these inane conversations?
Yes, for years, you and I have been communicating on social media platforms about various movies and songs and TV shows, and then we kind of go off on our own conversation. So this was a perfect idea. I think you and I have several movies in common that we absolutely love. So we
Yeah.
have similar tastes in movies, but I also have not seen a ton of films that you've seen and vice versa.
Yeah. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And we've picked one today that's your movie that you have seen. And you are like Generation X and I'm a slightly younger Generation X. So like
Yes.
this is a good way for us to bridge the gap between our generational differences here. This movie that we picked is Pretty Woman, which I had never seen. It came out in 1990, so I was 12 when this came out. So it wasn't exactly like a movie a 12-year-old was going to get or want to watch or be allowed to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the parent there. I'm thinking that's a little inappropriate. I was 16 at the time. I was a junior in high school, and this hit just in time for a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah,
We were obsessed with this movie in high school.
just
Obsessed. I
walking the hallways in Boston dreaming of being a high-class prostitute.
That's exactly right. Oh, we can't say that anymore. Something I realized when I'm watching movie is the word hooker was totally okay in 1990. Now we say sex worker, of course. But yeah, 16 years old. I watched it multiple times at theater. And then we all had a VHS copy and we would pop it in as we were getting ready for prom. I'm so embarrassed to even be talking about this right now, but that's what happened.
Wow. Did you meet your like Richard Gere at the prom or?
I did not. By the way, he's so much older than Julia Roberts. We'll get into that.
Well, sure. Yeah, yeah. But that's not a problem in Hollywood.
No, it's not. Still not a problem 32 years later.
Uh,
So, the plot of Pretty Woman, in case anyone hasn't seen Pretty Woman, you're maybe one of the only people out there who hasn't seen it yet, Nick. Edward Lewis, a high powered corporate raider from New York, buys and dismantles struggling companies, selling off the assets for profit. He wants his girlfriend, Jessica, to accompany him during a business trip, but fed up with being his beck and call girl, she breaks up with him. Leaving a business party in the Hollywood Hills, Edward takes his lawyer's Lotus Esprit sports car and accidentally ends up on Hollywood Boulevard in the city's red light district. There, he encounters sex worker Vivian Ward. That's, of course, Julia Roberts. As he is having difficulties driving a manual transmission car, he pays Vivian to drive him to the Regent Beverly Wilshire Hotel. Edward then impulsively hires her for the night, and despite some awkwardness, finds her charming, gets on well with her, and then Pretty Woman happens. That's just the opening scene. I don't know if you want me to read the rest of
well,
it.
yeah, they
We
have
go through
ups
the
and downs.
rest.
They get together. They argue. I mean, it's a typical rom-com, and then it ends. And I mean, we can say this spoiler alert, but I mean, this movie came out
32
20
years ago.
32 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, my math was bad. 32 years ago. So he sweeps her off her feet at the end, and she's his princess, and you know,
Yeah.
happily
He
ever
he
after.
he helps her refine herself through the
And hey,
process.
she helps him refine himself too, because
She saves him too. Last line.
one of the things, yeah, exactly. One of the things that like struck me is at the beginning of this movie anyway was like this guy's supposed to be our hero. Like his whole thing is just stripping companies for parts.
Mhm.
So I was like, I really hoped that the little redemptive arc would happen, and it did.
It did. I still found when I watched it today after many years, I just couldn't believe how unlikable Richard Gere is, and maybe because I'm 48 now, and I just find so many things about him in the movie unlikable.
Sure.
Um, it's just I don't know. What he does, what he values, the little cut downs through the movie of Julia Roberts. Did you pick up on all those?
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He's definitely putting in her place over and over again.
Yeah.
That's what's funny because Richard Gere I've never enjoyed in movies, in any movie, and I think he's a very pretty hollow shell. Like, he's a very handsome man. He smiles well, but like I just feel like there's
Really does.
nothing behind it. Like he has vacant eyes, and then
Yeah.
like this character that's written to be so empty, it
Yeah.
just, I mean, maybe it's perfect casting, but I, I feel like the only thing that draws her to him is money, and he's good looking.
Right. Exactly what I was thinking as I was watching. How is she falling in love with him? And then you think, okay, money, but money aside, I don't know. I guess in the movie they talk about how they have things in common. They screw people over for money. That was one of the lines.
Yeah.
And then they both obviously figure out a way out of that by the end. He is very good looking, and I'm thinking to myself, who else could have played this role? And at the end of the day, I think he was perfect for that role. And he does have great chemistry with Julia Roberts.
Yeah, for sure. But that line, like, we both screw people for money, like, but in her job, the people she's screwing get something out of it. They get to have sex with Julia Roberts.
Exactly.
The people he's screwing get bankruptcy or like early
Exactly.
retirement in a trailer park or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
It's
it's sort of a
crazy.
false analogy.
Yeah, absolutely. But in
Prostitutes have bring
1990,
value to society. That's what I'm
yeah.
saying. And corporate raiders do not.
Yeah, right. What was your overall take when you were done with the movie? Because your first time, 2022, um, would be way different, obviously, than any of us in 1990. It hasn't aged that well.
I thought I was not going to like it. I didn't mind it. Like, it was fine. It was a fine movie. Like,
Yeah.
it's a product of its times. And like, people sometimes are surprised who know me when I say this, but I really like rom-coms. Like, I have a soft spot for romantic comedies, good ones. And this is not a bad one. I mean, it's the
Yeah,
highest grossing
it's really
rom-com
good.
of all time.
The thing that struck me the most when the movie ended was, wow, I really enjoyed watching that again, even though I have so many problems with like the ideas in this movie. But it's so obvious why this just launched Julia Roberts right into superstardom. She was so great in this movie. I had no idea until today when I looked it up that she was nominated for an Academy Award. She
Yeah.
lost to Kathy Bates in Misery, which
Well,
would have been
yeah.
hard to beat, but she was so great in this, and I don't think she had been in that many films before this. I think maybe like Steel
Mystic Pizza.
Magnolias, a
I
couple
read
other
Steel
things.
Magnolias came out right after this.
Oh, it did.
But
Okay.
so Mystic Pizza was, I think, her
Okay.
big one before
But
this, which I've
this, I
not seen
mean,
either.
there were so many scenes that she apparently came up with on the fly, improv, and were great. And it was what made her character Vivian so endearing. So that might be the most perfect casting ever. And I'm glad they didn't choose Molly Ringwald.
Oh yeah, yeah, because Molly Ringwald was up for the part, but she didn't want to play a prostitute.
Well, right, the original, did you know the original screenplay for this and what they were casting people for was super dark and depressing?
Yeah, I read that, and that who someone else was attached to this and then bailed when it became a
Mhm.
rom com. And I'm
So it was called 3,000
yeah.
for the $3,000 that Edward was going to give Vivian at the end of the week. And Vivian was an addict, and they, I guess, made a deal not to, she couldn't use that week. And then Kit DeLuca, who's my favorite character in the whole movie,
Mhm.
dies in the original movie, in the original screenplay. She, I think, overdoses. And in the end, um, I don't think they ended up together. I think I heard Julia Roberts say like Edward kicks her out of a car and throws money at her, but I don't think that was true. I think Vanity Fair cleared it up and said no, it wasn't that bad. But and there are all these debates about whether or not they should have like stuck with the original script. But no way, we got Pretty Woman out of it. I mean, Disney ended up wanting a rom com, so
But okay, so I have two things I want to talk about here. First, the ending, right? So yeah, you can have a happy ending, but like literally, it's like it's a cliche now.
oh, it's
He's
the
like
worst.
cruises down the road in the limo and he's hanging out at the top yelling, Vivian, Vivian. Like, there could have been like an earnest way that wasn't super cheeseball, like with him being like the big hero, You know, like he treated her very poorly and now he's the hero. Like he should come back to her on bended knee and say, "Hey, I'm an idiot. Please
And
take me. I love you."
she should reject him and he should try again and then they end up together kind of situation.
Like
All he had to
realistic.
do was poke his head through the sunroof and hold up some cheap flowers, like
Yeah.
3 roses. That's it. That's all it took. And play some opera music that there's no way she could have heard from 2 blocks away.
There's that too. Yeah, because he's approaching and she's like, "What? What? Someone's yelling? Let me go to
Yeah,
the window."
how did she know based on beep, beep, beep? Did I miss something earlier in the movie?
No.
She's like, "Oh, it's a horn. It must be him coming back to save me."
Movie magic.
Yeah, it was so weird.
Well, so the
Yeah,
other thing I want to talk about real quick, recycling or rewinding back to Julia Roberts' casting. Yes, she's great in the movie, but like now that she's so famous and I've seen her in so many things, my image of Julia Roberts at all time is like this super sophisticated, classy lady. Like, is the same
yeah.
problem I had with her in Erin Brockovich. Not that she wasn't great in Erin Brockovich, but
So
like,
she's campy to you in Pretty Woman and like over the top.
I don't believe that she's like sort of rough around the edges because I
Yeah,
know that she's not. And I
yeah,
think that's a product of me viewing it 32 years later, knowing who Julia Roberts
exactly.
is. Um,
Yeah,
she's
I
very
think you're
good in
right.
it and lovable in that movie. Like she's just the
I
best
don't
thing in
think I
it.
had seen Mystic Pizza. So I think when I saw this, I was like, oh, she's awesome. I don't know who Julia Roberts is, but it worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
And of course she's, gorgeous. She's what, 23 at the time when
Something,
they filmed
yeah.
this, and he was 41, which I guess you're right. In Hollywood, that's not that much older.
When he is so gray though, too. Like I know he went gray really early, but he seems a lot older too.
Yeah, he really seems like he could be truly her uncle.
Mm-hmm. What's
Yes.
crazy to me is he is younger in that movie than I am right now. And I think if you put a picture of me up versus a picture of him then.
Oh yeah, you look yet way younger than him.
Thank you. That's what I
Absolutely.
was trolling for. I appreciate you taking the bait on
I'm
that one.
right now 7 years older than he was when he filmed that movie, which is frightening because he still seems like a dad. What was your
But
who
like
was your favorite character?
a skeevy dad, like
Yeah,
like
totally
you have
skeevy
a
dad.
slumber party and he's like, "Hi girls," and he hangs out a little too long.
Yeah,
And
the real skeeve was Jason Alexander though. And I guess in
uh,
the original, in 3000, Richard Gere was supposed to be a little bit more like Jason Alexander, which would be more realistic, I
mhm.
think. Um, what was your favorite part of the movie? Like, what was the most redeeming qualities of the movie? Was it a character?
Well, you asked my favorite character first, and it's
Yeah,
Julia Roberts, obviously. I
yeah.
mean, she's the most likable thing in it. I mean, she's the only well, her roommate's likable enough, but like as far as my favorite movie, or my favorite moment in the movie, the whole like when she goes back into the store and rubs it in their face, that's very
Oh, I love that.
satisfying.
That was really great as a 16-year-old too. I remember thinking this is the best. Big mistake, big, huge. I mean, we used to just repeat the line all the time. And I still love it because I still feel like I have imposter syndrome when I go to a nice boutique or whatever and I don't belong there and I want to like run up and tell them off even though they're being perfectly nice to me. But it's one of those scenes that you think about all the time when you're in a posh place and you're like, well, Julia Roberts, she walked in there and kicked some ass. Why was the money all crumpled up though? I've never understood this. When she's talking to Hector, who's like the fairy godmother of the film,
Yeah.
and she's like, I have all this money, no one will help me. I love that relationship too, by the way, that he like kind of saves her after, raising his eyebrow and looking at her and saying she doesn't belong in this place and then claiming she was the niece. Why does she have a handful of crumpled up money? What was Vivian doing with that money?
Well, I mean, it could be one of a couple things. I think it's meant to show that she's not sophisticated, so she just balls it up and stuffs it in her pocket like a child.
Maybe she stuffs it down her boots. I don't know.
Well, I was thinking, she stuffs it in the bra, like
Yeah.
for safekeeping or to like fill out. I don't know. That's possible, but no, I think it's meant to show like that she's childlike in that way. Like
Yeah.
she's a rube, and that's how she keeps her money.
She's a fresh-faced hooker, and that's
Yeah.
kinda how they marketed the thing. It's like she's a hooker, but she's a safe hooker. She, has a rainbow assortment of condoms. She, doesn't kiss on the mouth. She what else?
And she hasn't been doing
No
this very long.
drugs. She's really into oral hygiene.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's meant to, like, she hasn't been doing this very long, so she's not a
Yeah.
wasted woman yet, or
Yes.
whatever the film's
Yeah,
morality, whatever you
absolutely.
think.
I loved Kit. I loved Kit DeLuca, and I think it would be great if we had seen more scenes with her. And I thought, why didn't she become like a breakout star? I know she was in a lot of shows, like TV shows and stuff, and she had a good career,
Yeah,
but I
she was
feel
in
like she
Just
was
Shoot Me.
really good in Pretty Woman. And I want
I just saw Laura San Giacomo. She was just in Barry, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, she was. I actually have only seen a couple episodes of Barry, so maybe I just haven't appreciated more of her recent stuff.
Hmm.
So I loved her. I loved Hector Elizondo.
Yeah,
He was great. That's right. I keep calling him Hector. It's Barney. Barney is the manager of the hotel, and
played by
he plays.
Hector.
Yeah, exactly. And Barney is the fairy godmother, and it is. I love that relationship too. I think that was fantastic. I wish I'd seen a little bit more of that. And I felt like such a cheeseball at the end when he watched her walk out of the hotel, and he was sort of proud of her, but also sad. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? Why am I falling for this again?
Well, but I mean, I think part of it is because he's one of the only recognizable human beings in this movie. Because
Yeah,
I mean, most of the main characters feel like sort of characters rather than people, and he's obviously a character too. But at least there's some genuine human
yeah.
empathy within him.
Were you struck by how um, materialistic and misogynistic this movie was for 1990? It seemed more like 1983 to me,
I don't know
but
if I
maybe.
could delineate the 7 year gap there,
I
like
mean,
where things changed.
it was so bad. It was so Wall Street. Every little thing, from okay, now she has the right clothes and she knows how to use a fork, so she's a better person and good for her. What a victory! To everything Edward does for a living.
Hmm.
Um, I guess we didn't really make that many great strides by 1990, so I shouldn't be surprised. But I was like, oh gosh, I forgot. I mean, it's like an 80s plot for sure.
Well, but I mean, you think of when the movie actually gets developed
Yeah, you're
in the
right. They
late
shot it in the
80s and
80s.
through, it's
Yep.
Reagan's America, there's,
Yep.
it's,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to judge older movies sometimes through our modern lens
Yeah.
because everything is always going to be problematic. Like when
Yeah.
I watched Revenge of the Nerds recently,
I need to
I
go
was
back and
like
watch that.
blown away. I hadn't seen it in a long time. And I loved that movie when I was 15. And I'm like, holy crap, like rape and just terrible stuff. Racist, this is the whole movie. Like, and
Yeah.
at the time, I
Just
didn't recognize any
tropes,
of that.
never ending.
Yeah.
Like in this movie, Jason Alexander's character was awful. So awful. And he tries to rape Vivian, sexual assault, and they just, he gets a punch in the face and that's it.
Yeah.
It's like, this is so typical for the time.
Yeah. He got his, but I feel like that entire thing was just set up so Richard Gere could do something redeeming.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the whole thing with him saving the company is all great and everything, but at the end he helps, rebuild the company instead of tearing it down. But ultimately, I feel like he has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. And I feel like even that, like, and not only does he not have redeeming qualities, he faces zero consequences for having no redeeming qualities. So
Right.
he's the hero for doing the right thing that, like you shouldn't get, like Chris Rocco has said, that's what you're supposed to do. You don't deserve credit for doing what you're supposed to do.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. He plays the piano well. I'm trying to think of anything that he did in the movie. That was actually him playing the piano, I think.
I read that
Um,
the snap of the case, that was a ad-libbed moment.
oh, that's right. That's right.
So
He
her
did
laugh
that.
was genuine. She was genuinely surprised.
Yeah, that's good. Apparently, they also had to, who's the director again?
Gary Marshall.
Yeah, that's right. Gary Marshall had to tickle her feet when she was watching I Love Lucy because she's not great at laughing on cue. And that guffaw that she gave out was perfect. So it was genius. I mean, it's just one of those things in the movie that makes her so likable.
Yeah.
Um, there were a couple things that really bugged me, just besides Edward being a prick. Um, Vivian taking his socks off when they were having a little picnic. Do you remember that?
I,
That
I,
was
I do. So
so
he could feel the grass on his feet.
what the hell?
I think metaphorically it's so that he can like it has part of his redemptive arc, because remember later in the movie he takes a little walk
You're
with his
right.
shoes off in the grass, and it's like he's connecting to the earth again, and he's not being such a jerk because he's in
That's
touch
all
with
it took.
himself.
Her to take his stinky, steamy socks from his dress shoes off for a minute while he's still on a work call
Yeah.
and making a deal. That was the moment for him. So he
That
goes
era was
back
all
and
about
walks
taking your
around in the
shoes
mud.
off.
What was
That
that?
movie was all about taking your shoes off, that era, because in Die Hard, remember, he takes his shoes off to like feel the carpet in his feet. And this is how like yuppies connected to their humanity.
That's so perfect. There were tons of shots of her barefoot and walking around too.
Was
Oh my
Quentin
gosh.
Tarantino was sniffing around there like, oh, all right.
That's right. He was involved. I'm just rolling my eyes at the opera scene when I saw it this morning. How she like immediately falls in love with opera. I think it would have been great had she like fallen asleep and started drooling because I'm not into opera.
But again, that's how showing that she is not the simple rube we think she is.
No, she is. She's now she's what about every blonde in the movie being evil?
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Every single blonde person in the movie was evil, and here comes this crazy curly-haired redhead.
I think you could probably relate to that concept though.
That I could?
Yeah. Hating blondes. You're a brunette.
Yeah, I'm Mediterranean, so I guess, yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. Blondes are waspy rich people, and they've got it going on. And here comes this redhead with this spiral crazy hair. And so, of course, the blonde is going to be the bad person.
Which is kind of different than your typical 80s, early 90s ish,
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah. It's probably still like that in Hollywood too. What about that being Hank Azaria's first role?
I know, right? He gets like 3
role in a
lines.
film. It's crazy.
I didn't realize how old he is. He is old.
Yeah, he looks good for his age. That's
Well,
why.
he does. I mean,
He looks really good.
he can afford to look good.
Yeah, I'm watching this scene, and of course, I'm analyzing it as a news reporter, going, wait a minute, why are they letting all these people cross the crime scene? And she just walks up and sees the dead body of, I don't know, Skinny Marie. I think that was her name, the sex worker who died at the beginning of the movie. And I thought, okay, this is the darkest part of the movie. That's as much as you're going to get as far as like how hard Vivian's job really is. And then I see Hank Azaria, and I totally forgot that he was in this movie. He was like, "Are you guys tourists?" And they're like, "Oh no." He said, "Are you guys journalists?" And the lady's like, "No, we're from New Jersey or wherever it was."
Yeah.
And I don't remember him being on camera in anything before that.
No, I read this was his very first on camera role. Yeah. And then of course
speaking role.
Simpsons was like that same year, I think 1990.
He blew up after this film.
It was funny to me watching this, how many scenes, even though I'd never seen the movie, how many scenes and shots and lines I already knew, like the bathtub scene and the snapping of the jewelry. Obviously, I knew the ending because I'd seen a clip of it somewhere, and like, I knew the broad strokes of the movie, so there were plot details that surprised me or I didn't know, but I just was it's funny how that works, with pop culture.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm amazed by how many things my husband must miss out on a daily basis because he's not on any social media platforms, and he never has been, and he doesn't know what GIFs are and memes. He's like a 90-year-old man. And so he doesn't get so many references every day. I think last week he asked Soren what BRB meant in a text. I'm like, how do you not know what be right back is in a text? And I'm like, we're watching shows. I'm like, do you know what that is? He goes, I have no idea what that is. I'm like, oh, that's from Twitter or that's from Facebook. Or so, yeah, going through 32 years of not having seen Pretty Woman is probably all now clicking to you. You've heard all of these things before.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess I wasn't that surprised because I feel like there's a lot of famous movies that, I've never seen that you just know. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Kind of the point of this podcast, I think. I have a lot of movies I need to see that you have seen.
Yeah, I love movies and I like to branch out and see weird stuff. So I think with this podcast, we'll do some stuff everybody knows. And every now and again, I'm going to throw you a weird curveball that I think will be fun.
I love it.
One thing that I thought was really interesting, I was reading a little bit about this film, is how many actors were considered for the roles and just how different the movies would be. Like my favorite one was, instead of Richard Gere, it would be Charles Grodin.
I saw that. Okay, that would never work. One of the others I saw on the list, I don't know if it's true or not because it seems so insane, is Albert Brooks.
Well, but we know now from his latter career, he can play serious and he can play funny.
Imagine him in bed with Julia Roberts, though, and they're having that conversation, and
Yeah.
she's talking about how she's a bum magnet, and Albert Brooks is just lying there without his clothes on next to Julia Roberts. Like, what?
You,
Denzel Washington, I heard that too. I read that.
I mean, he'd be great, but that would be that would attract a lot of attention then that they didn't want, the interracial
Absolutely.
aspect of it, I'm sure.
And then Al Pacino was the big person, right? Who are they almost cast?
Yeah, I just can't imagine anybody. Al Pacino's great, but can you imagine Julia Roberts falling head over heels with Al Pacino?
No,
Like
no.
Richard Gere, for all his faults in the movie, is still very handsome at the
Yeah,
very
he's
least.
gorgeous.
And
Yeah,
like, you know, he's got that pretty smile and everything. You
absolutely. And he'd
plasters
already,
over a lot of
I mean,
faults.
Officer and a Gentleman and all these movies, where he also played kind of a jerk and very similar vibe, you know, closed off, problems with his past, problems with his dad, doesn't want to let anyone in. I mean, it's essentially the same character,
Yeah.
except
Well,
he's
it's not like
really
he's
rich
ever
and
been
Pretty
accused
Woman.
of having range.
Yeah, yeah.
So one of the things we talked about is, would I recommend this movie to others? Yes. I think it's a time capsule of its time. It still has charm. Like, I didn't not enjoy watching it. I just feel like we watch things sometimes with a critical eye and we poke holes, but the whole of it was still entertaining, even though, like, you know, we have all these complaints.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I watched it and loved it in high school. And, over the years, it's like you're flipping through the channels in a hotel room and it's on and you watch half of it or whatever. But I hadn't seen it in so long. And my brain, as a 48-year-old woman in 2022, was like, you can't like that movie because of the whole premise of the movie of this guy saving this strong woman who's a sex worker, and then everything's fine because she gets new clothes and she has someone to take care of her. So I watched it this morning and then I was like, oh, and then I'm like, I do like this movie. It is a guilty pleasure for sure.
Yeah.
But it's really good. I'm sorry. It's good. It's problematic, but it's also just like it hits all the right notes. And that's why it made a gazillion dollars in 1990 and everyone loved it. And Julia Roberts became a superstar.
Yeah, it's still the highest grossing rom-com of all time.
It is really. That's
I think
incredible.
so.
I had no idea.
I think not. I think adjusted for modern dollars, because
Yeah.
inflation and all that.
My sister in law, who was a graduate student in epidemiology when this movie came out, walked out. And we've talked about this over the years. She just walked out of the movie, was disgusted by it. And I would love for her to watch it again to get her her take as a 57-year-old woman who's watching it 32 years later. I got to see if she's softened on Pretty Woman.
Okay, so now movies are great, but most of the time on a Tuesday night or whatever, I'm watching a movie, as are you, presumably. Well, not a Tuesday night because you go to bed at like 4:30 in the afternoon. But what are you watching right now?
I am rewatching The Good Place with both my kids and my husband. I watched the first couple of seasons and now I'm rewatching it with the whole family and everyone's obsessed with it. We all love it.
Yeah, we really enjoyed that series as well. We've seen the whole thing, but it's
Yeah.
probably one of those that'd be better to rewatch now that you know where it's going.
Yeah, and it's, I have a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old and they both love it for different reasons, and Kristen Bell, and they're also great. It's such a good movie. I have watched 3 episodes of Severance and I'm excited to keep going with that.
Yeah, Severance is
Have
great.
you caught up on that?
Yeah, I watch way too much TV. Like, so we put the 5-year-old to bed. Then it's like 9 o'clock. And it's like, what am I going to do for the next couple of hours? I don't know.
So what are you watching right now?
Well, so, okay. My wife and I always have a show or two we watch together. And then like I have another show, like when I have a half an hour here and there. So when I'm by myself, I'm rewatching News Radio,
Oh,
which
I
is
love
one of
that show.
my
Yeah.
favorite sitcoms from the 90s. Such a funny show. I'm disappointed because no one else cares about this, but the existing prints of it, I think they shot it on tape rather than film. So if you watch Friends or Seinfeld now, it still looks great because it was transferred from film and it's high definition. But News Radio was shot on tape, so it looks like VHS
Oh,
garbage, but it's
yeah.
still a great show. And so that's yeah. And then together we're watching the She-Hulk. We've been enjoying that
Oh,
quite a bit.
interesting.
Yeah, even if you're not a Marvel person, it's just funny,
Yeah.
and
What We Do in the Shadows is the show that you suggested
yeah.
that I watch.
Oh, you started it.
No, I started one episode and then I found out one of my college friends is in it.
I know. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, so I haven't reached out to him and said anything to him because I want to get a bunch of episodes under my belt. So that is, I really do need a TV sabbatical because I have so many shows on my list, but I want to start with that show.
Yeah, and he becomes, no spoilers, but he becomes more prominent the longer the show goes on.
Right. So it's relatively recent to now because I've seen him tweet about it a couple of times. I had no idea.
Yeah, and we can talk more about it maybe on a future episode once you've gotten a few more of these under your belt.
Yeah, for sure.
So then we also decided it would be fun, since we're both parents, to talk about what are our kids watching. And you mentioned a minute ago you guys are watching The Good Place, but
Mhm.
our children are different ages. Mine's 5 and you have a 10 and 13-year-old. So what
Yeah.
are the kids watching these days?
It gets really fun at 13 because they can watch so much more. Soren just started 30 Rock with me.
Oh, nice.
I'm like rewatching 30 Rock for the 10th time with him, and he is just obsessed with Tracy Jordan. And so we're watching that. Alex is really into a bunch of like anime type Japanese shows. I don't know the names of them. He watches a lot of them on YouTube. And then he watches The Good Place with us. He really loves philosophy. And so I think that part of The Good Place is striking a chord with him. So I need to find a good show for him that's, I mean, I don't want him to have an existential crisis because he's a kid that tends to do that and he's only 10 and a half, but I need to find those kinds of shows. Soren just wants to laugh like I do. He loves Parks and Rec. So we watch a lot of Parks and Rec reruns too. What are you guys watching?
Firebuds. Yeah,
Nice.
it's an animated show on Disney about anthropomorphic fire engines, rescue ambulance, police cars, hanging out with kids. It's very bizarre, and my son is absolutely obsessed with it. Just there's 13 episodes and he's watched all of them. What's funny too about my son is he's 5 and like he gets not scared, but I'd say uncomfortable very easily with shows, and he wants me to turn it off. And like it's not because there's violence or it's because the people in it aren't acting nicely. Like the interpersonal
he would not be a
conflict.
fan of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
No, I don't. I can barely watch Curb Your Enthusiasm because of that same reason.
Really?
I've seen the first 2 seasons and I liked them enough, but like I want when I leave a show to feel better than when I started. And like I just found myself just dreading watching the show because I knew I was going to feel anxious.
I do feel better when it ends about myself because I'm not quite as bad as Larry David.
Well,
I start each show thinking I'm a horrible person. And then by the end, I'm like, well, I'm not as bad as Larry David.
that's fine.
I love that show. But oh, Nick, you have so many fantastic movies and shows in your future with August. It's going to be amazing. Like the first time he can watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off and just the magic of that movie. Both my kids love it. And when we're sitting there struggling to find a movie, like on a Friday night, go to Ferris Bueller's Day Off and just click on More Like This. And we've watched all of them, of course.
That's cool.
So yeah, it's so great.
I'm looking forward to like Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh yeah, so good. So good. They love those. I was going to say Eurovision. Nope, August is way too young.
Way too young. I do like that movie. We should talk about that one sometime. But
my kids really love that.
Well, I'm really into Eurovision. My wife and I, we actually watch it every year, the competition.
Yes.
And so it's struck a sweet spot with me. It's on a Saturday, and because it's in like Europe, we just get up at like, it's on at like 11 a.m. So it's some champagne and some brunch and just sit down for 4 hours and watch the whole thing and enjoy it. And my wife's friend is British and he's over there, and he and his husband are like super into it. So we're texting them the whole time, and they're at like this big drag bar in England, and like they're sending photos. It's awesome. It's such a fun event. So
I obviously knew what Eurovision was, and my family in Greece talks about Eurovision because, it's a big deal for every country over there that participates. But I didn't go down that rabbit hole until I watched the movie, and now I want to be a Eurovision fan. So I might be getting up early the next time and
Yeah.
watching the competition.
Well, we should have a party. You come over,
Yeah.
bring the kids. It's fun.
So wholesome.
I'm sure Bill would love it.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd be right into it. Yeah.
So let's talk about what we're gonna do next week. And so you listening to this, we would really encourage you to watch it so you can kind of play along with us at home. The movie we are going to watch is my turn to pick, and you have not seen House of Gucci yet, and it is just brilliantly, insanely awful, and I can't wait for you to see it. And I say this like I was so excited because I love Ridley Scott. Like I think he's a fantastic director. And I had high hopes, even though Jared Leto I had heard was a little over the top, and boy, oh boy, is he. But like, I have never seen a Ridley Scott movie that is such a mess. Like, it's watchable, but it is terrible. I think you're gonna love it. I liked it.
I haven't read any reviews on purpose because I knew that this could come up in this podcast, and I would be watching. So I don't want anyone to influence, but I have heard just by word of mouth from people that it's either really horrible and so campy, or it's so good you just don't understand it. I've heard people say that.
I would like to meet these people. And
yeah. So I'm excited to watch it. It's gonna be good. It's not gonna be good.
Yeah, you're gonna like it though.
It's based on your take.
Who knows? Everybody likes different stuff. So join us next week. We're gonna watch that, and let me look up real quick while we're talking where people can see that, because I thought it'd be fun to like tell people where the streaming services are.
Yeah, I got Pretty Woman on Amazon. I had to rent it though as a Prime member.
I told you can use my Plex server, man. Watch it for free. You can do the same with House of Gucci. I own it, and I don't know why I own it, but I do.
Nice.
So according to the internet, House of Gucci is available to rent from all the usual places or on Paramount Plus, Sling TV, Roku channel, Philo, and the rest are all rentals. So, good luck with that. I don't know if it's worth spending money on. I certainly wouldn't advocate illegally downloading it, but that would be an option if you're so inclined.
Lady Gaga. Yeah. Who else is in it? Jared Leto.
Jared Leto. It's a Jared Leto. That's all I'm going to say.
That's so good. Okay, I'm excited.
All right, well, this was fun. We'll do it again in a week.
Yeah, so fun. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, thank you. See you next week, guys. Hey, I gotta plug some stuff. Follow me on Twitter at Nick Voll, NickVoll. Follow Angelica wherever she tells you. At Angelica K2, where I do not post my news stories. It's all personal. It's all personal. You're always this close on that Twitter account to getting fired, I feel like. I am. So, right on the edge. All right. We'll see you next week.